Alrighty, so one way we might try to cultivate wisdom is to try out the method that Socrates used, the method that now has his name associated with it, the Socratic Method. This is the method that Socrates used to try to figure out which ideas were true, which ideas were false. But before we get into the specifics of how that method works and look at how it functions in a conversation between people, I want to give you a brief overview of some important ideas about Socrates' ideas about ideas. Because if we're going to use his method as a way of evaluating ideas, we should probably know something about what he thought of ideas being in the first place. All right, so Socrates thought that truth and ideas are real. This is what he means, or this is what I mean. My bottle of vitamins here is real. My car in the garage is real. This piece of paper is real. And when I say these things are real, I'm saying that these things exist in actuality. They're not just figments of my imagination. When I tell you there's a unicorn in my backyard right now, you're probably like, well, that's not true because unicorns aren't real. Some people will tell us that ideas aren't real in the same way that the bottle of vitamins or the piece of paper or the car is real. And they're right in a sense, right? Because an idea is not something you can hold in your hand like I can hold the paper. An idea is not something that I can lick or smell. It doesn't have any particular fragrance to it. So all that means is they're not real in the same way that physical things that we can perceive with our physical senses are real. Nonetheless, Socrates did not think that ideas were just figments of our imaginations. He did not think that they were just these phantoms in our head that we create. He thought that they were real, but in a different way than material things are real. They don't exist in the physical realm, they exist in the non-physical realm. And though we can access ideas with our physical senses, we can, Socrates claims, access them with our intellect. He thought of our intellect as a facility of perception that was analogous to our physical organs. It's just that our intellect allows us to perceive those non-material things called ideas. So ideas like truth and beauty and love and loyalty, these are real for Socrates. These are not just things that people make up. Okay? He also thought that these ideas exist within each person. And this is an important point for Socrates and for Plato too, we'll see. What Socrates means here is that, remember what he said in the Apology, the real person is housed in a human body, but it's not a body. It's a psyche, it's a spirit, it's a soul, it's some non-material thing that during birth or during gestation begins to inhabit a physical body. And for Socrates, that non-physical, non-material, spiritual, psyche, soul is something that came from the non-material realm where all of the pure, perfect, true ideas were, and they were all in that non-material soul. So the ideas are all in here. But, this is kind of weird, Socrates says that the trauma of passing through the birth canal was so significant that it caused us to lose our ability to perceive all that knowledge that was within. And so we can't access it unless we work really hard. Now, to work really hard, Socrates says, involves doing two things. You have to move in two directions. And any kind of directional or physical space talks gets really weird here, because for Socrates, he's saying, there's knowledge that's outside of you that exists in reality, in the non-material realm of reality, the realm of ideas, where the forms that we'll look at more later, these pure, perfect forms of ideas like beauty and truth and justice exist. They exist independently of us, but because we come from that realm as spiritual souls, or spirits or souls, those ideas are also a part of us. And so we have to both sort of look in and look outward. And again, the inward-outward is kind of funny because we're talking about things that are non-material, so how does direction even apply? But we'll get into that later. But the bottom line is, or not one of the bottom lines here, is that for Socrates then, to learn was not about gathering information. it was in part about recollecting, right? That um, learning is to discover the truth that was always within. And Socrates doesn't mean that like a my truth type thing. It's not I'm going to discover my truth. It's that you're going to discover the truth that is in you and in a part of everybody else, because everybody else, their true selves, are these non-material souls that came from ultimate reality. And so we're gonna when we learn, we're really remembering something we always knew but had lost touch with. And so maybe think about it this way, since it all sounds kind of goofy. You know that feeling you have when you solve a math problem and you know it's like it just clicks, and you can almost like feel it, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I just figured this out, and you know it, and it's almost like a physical sensation. Socrates would say, well, that was just you discovering what was always there. And that feeling was the feeling of discovery. That's why when you do a math problem, you don't keep doing it over and over and over again, as if you're going to learn something each time you do it. Once you've done it, you've found the knowledge. And he even has some dialogues where he kind of does this with people, showing them they've always known the principles of geometry, even though they didn't know that they did. So at the end of the Apology, Socrates says, the unexamined life is not worth living, and it's not worth living because to Socrates, ideas mattered more than physical things, especially the idea of the truth. And so if you spent your life not finding the truth, in his judgment, you've wasted your life. It wasn't a life worth living. And when Socrates says, know thyself, we in our age kind of interpret that in our sort of typical narcissistic, egotistical way, which is like, yes, I got to be the best me. You do you, I'll do me. I got to find my truth. Socrates would hate that phrase, my truth, by the way. He would look at us and with probably some contempt and say, there's no such thing as your truth or my truth. There's just the truth. So he probably wouldn't like the hyper focus on sort of radical individual expressionism that our culture has come to embrace in the last couple thousand, well, not the last couple thousand, really the last 600 or 100 years or so. All right, so keep this in mind. This is where Socrates is coming from when he uses this method of dialogue to interact with people with the goal of figuring out which ideas are true and which ideas are false.